coming up on this episode of the Roundtable.
Part of the problem is that American Christianity is sometimes so used to prosperity and to relative freedom from persecution. I know that there are like counterexamples to this, but in general, right, this is a country that does not like round up Christians and execute them en masse. And so Christians are not always acquainted with just the like how seriously Jesus means that. Like he really is saying, you know, this is just a broken system from the word go. And so if you discover that the people in charge of the most powerful nation in the world are weaponizing the decline of an old man with cancer to like cover up their own petty venality, you know, that shouldn't be news to you. That should just be sort of like, that should be what you expect. And then you move from there, you know? Hello, and welcome once again to the Roundtable, your weekly publishers and editors podcast here at the American Mind. I'm your host this week, Spencer Clavin, associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books and big, beautiful editor of the American Mind. I am joined this week by managing editor Mike Sabo and our regular guest, Seth Barron. Ryan Williams is out today. He's traveling, so we're holding down the fort. And I think we have to start with talking about Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. On Sunday morning, it was announced that he has been diagnosed with prostate cancer that has metastasized to his bones. So this is the sort of diagnosis that, it's a really bleak one. It has the phrase that we are all now learning, many of us for the first time, a Gleason score of 9, which is this rating from 1 to 10 of how likely you are to survive it. 10 is kind of the worst. So this is clearly very serious and severe. It's stage 4 cancer. And I guess we should say at the outset that this is the sort of thing that nobody in his right mind wants to celebrate or feel good about. It's very sad whenever anybody is dying. And of course, it becomes immediately awkward to discuss these sorts of things in a political context, but also this is entering into a political context. It comes right as Jake Tapper, the CNN anchor, is releasing his co-authored book with Alex Thompson of Axios called Original Sin, dropped on Monday. And it's about the cover-up, not of this particular health problem, but of Biden's mental decline, which is now sort of finally a subject of interrogation on the left as well as on the right. It's so widely accepted that people are talking about it everywhere. And there's a big after-action review or postmortem, so to speak, going on among the Democrats about who is to blame. Did the press cover this up? Did members of Biden's team cover it up? All sorts of internal leaks that have been coming out. And this is the kind of book-length account of it. And so speculation has ensued, right? I mean, there's everything from, is it possible that Biden's doctors could have not known about this cancer until this very moment? Ezekiel Emanuel, Rahm's brother, who was part of Biden's transition team, made a big statement that this is not the sort of thing that could possibly have only now been discovered. But some people are asking questions about whether this was also covered up. On to the kind of larger question of, does this distract from or make it impossible to talk about the other issue, which has more to do with his fitness to run again, his fitness to be in office at the time, et cetera, yada, yada. Trump was actually initially quite gracious. He sort of put forward a statement praying for the Bidens and wishing them well. He has now since engaged in this conversation, but everyone is kind of throwing mud, I guess, about whether the conversation, which parts of the conversation are okay to have and which ones are absolutely shameful and hideous. So I will start with that. There are some other kind of dimensions of this story, but I don't know. What do you guys make of it? Does this actually add anything meaningful besides a kind of sordid tragedy to what was already kind of a shameful cover up, or is there more to this that we should be talking about?
I think it with the Democrats, it's funny. I mean, I just think of Bill Clinton, going back to the Clinton administration. I mean, just how they weaponized so much and got they made it really hard to actually talk about what was happening. So many kind of like funhouse, mirror type stuff. All these kind of strategies to get you to not talk about what was actually happening. And I feel like, in a way, I mean, of course, like you said, Spencer, this is a sad thing. My mom passed away from cancer, breast cancer, in 2022. So I've dealt with this, as millions of Americans have, and of cancer of some form or kind. So that obviously is, a very sad thing, especially cancer at that kind of stage. I mean, he has to be, I'm sure, feeling the effects of that, every day, every second of probably every day. So definitely prayers for him, for, if not recovery, just that things wouldn't be, quite as bad, that he wouldn't kind of feel those effects. But in one way, I think you do bring out the timeline. I mean, that is interesting that it just so happened to come not only after, I think right around the publication of Original Sin, which was that Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson book that I think was published on the 20th, the full transcript of the Robert Hur, who's special counsel, that also came out too. 5 hours of Biden just kind of seemingly dawdling and not being able to kind of answer any kind of question at all. And that was basically gummed up. That didn't come out earlier because of his own attorney general, it seems like, at the DOJ, who obviously that would have hurt, Biden even more during 2024 before he decided to drop out. So that's the problem. Is this is usual? I don't know if it's, Team Biden themselves. I mean, they're obviously trying to help themselves in certain ways, but it just seems like a typical just Democratic Party playbook, which is something that, there's a cover up, there's something there, and then all of a sudden they attach something that makes it really difficult to actually talk about it. And then if you do talk about it, you're the bad guy.
You're a bad
Trump.
person. Right.
Absolutely. You're morally tainted. Trump talking about this the way he did, I know, the 4D chess thing is greatly, greatly overused, but that was actually pretty brilliant. Him talking about, hey, it's all these other people. It's this kind of cabal. It's this committee who is actually running things, who is actually in charge, truly. Biden maybe, was part of the committee, but I mean, he wasn't really president in any way. So we should actually go after these people. That was actually pretty brilliant, because it does get around the usual kind of Democratic shenanigans rhetorically.
It's
But
also
yeah,
true, right? It's like,
yeah,
one of the funny things here to me is, like, if your operating thesis was already that this was a deeply corrupt administration committed to doing everything possible to hide the truth from the voters so that they wouldn't have the information they needed to make a smart decision about, like, the president of the country, then you're not really learning much that is fundamentally new about their modus operandi. And you're probably already believe the worst about the team. And you've taken it into
right.
account that they were propping up this poor, old, dying man as their, like, human shield, essentially, to
Hmm.
distract from their own venality and corruption. That's if you are somebody who has already been on this forever. If you are on the left and you've been pretending that none of that was happening for a super long time, then this is, like, really uncomfortable. But actually, right, it does just sort of seem as if, from our perspective, there's not that much fundamentally new here, except that, like, they might have really been abusing this old man even more, basically.
Yeah, I mean, people always talk about how leaders are puppets and somebody's pulling their strings. Certainly, we all said that about Biden. I mean, I remember on this show a couple of years ago saying, like, we understand that Biden is incapable or incontinent or whatever, but who is running the show? And, this is what Trump asked the other day. It's still not clear. We really don't know. Was it these minor staffers who we don't know anything about? It doesn't seem like he was that tight with any one member of his cabinet. It's not like, okay, Cheney arguably was running the Bush White House, right? Cheney, Rumsfeld, like these types. But Kamala Harris didn't have that kind of pull. Obama, I suppose, might have been, but who was he working through? it's just still not clear at all. Regarding the Jake, I mean, I still don't understand how Jake Tapper, I mean, I know he's gotten some pushback on this, but this guy
Why is he the guy?
Right.
Why is he the person that we should hear from?
And why does he get to stand there and be outraged when, I mean, there's like these video compilations of him sneering and laughing and dismissing anyone who brings up Biden's questionable acuity, and he'll just start like shuffling his papers and being like, okay, we're not getting into that. That's just conspiracy theory talk. And now all of a sudden he gets to be the most aggrieved of all. I mean, he was the one perpetrating the whole thing. I mean,
like, sit this one out, right? I mean, maybe you're not the person to deliver this message.
You might think, but
yeah.
I mean, the thing about the cancer, I mean, I gather, people say, well, they don't necessarily test for prostate cancer once you get to be 70, 75 or so. Right. Because, I mean, the thing about prostate cancer, if you live long enough, you're going to get prostate cancer. That's basically what happens. And a lot of the time, it's not that big a deal. So they don't always go after it or monitor it. But I don't believe, they said that he hadn't had a test since 2014.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Because interventions are so aggressive that they sometimes, but it's like, this is the sort of question that
it's just a blood test. It's just a blood test. It's not like they have to do like a biopsy to find out. It's not like pancreatic cancer or something, right? Where you really need to like there's no, it just sneaks up on you. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think you're pointing out there's so much hubris too involved. It's like we can't actually even get to the truth of this thing because there's so many like self-interested operators. There's, I mean, the craven people in the media. Okay, yeah, sure. There are some good guys. I've heard Alex Thompson, actually, Axios, has been on this for years and really has had some vicious attacks on the Biden White House. So good to him. But, Jake Tapper, I mean, he raked Laura Trump over the coals, I think, when she tried to bring this up in an interview on CNN. So you have people, I mean, who just morally are just like in the dregs, all of a sudden trying to turn around and play hero, please. I mean, that is like the lowest of the low. That aspect of this whole thing, it's absurd.
Totally. I mean, there were people on the left who came out and said this at least earlier than sort of their peers, right? I think the Pod Save America guys kind of caught flack for talking about this. Ezra Klein, maybe. It was still much later than the right was talking about it, but it was at least you can kind of point to a record and say, and Alex Thompson is also apparently one of these people, although I'm not all that familiar with his work. But right, the Tapper of it all is really what makes it so absurd to begin with. And the cancer, like, it is possible for this stuff to function on two levels, right? People are capable of holding two thoughts in their head at once. This is a human being that has been kind of chewed up by the system. And also cancer is like a hideous tragedy and very sad anytime it happens. And also these matters, as people insisted for months leading up to the election, these matters are relevant to the presidency when the person involved in them is the president. Like, that's just kind of, you have to be able to talk about that. And this whole thing is designed to sort of like, as exactly as you said, Mike, to like obfuscate and make it impossible and attach this like unbearable moral weight to just forthright speech on the subject. Meanwhile, there's this report, Ron Johnson, the senator, just came out with this report which alleges that, I'm reading from it here, even though CDC and FDA officials were well aware of the risk of myocarditis following COVID-19 vaccination, the Biden administration opted to withhold issuing a formal warning to the public for months about the safety concerns jeopardizing the health of young Americans. So there's all sorts of stuff that, the dishonesty of this administration is now so well documented and so incriminating that this part of it, even though this was the most kind of egregious and shocking when the debate happened and he was so clearly in decline, like it actually isn't the main thing that people are trying to get at when they talk about this stuff. Like they're getting at the fact that this is, irrespective of whatever sad and sordid tale is going on within the White House, there's also like millions of people who were directly affected by this dishonesty and who were like deprived of information they needed to make serious life decisions affecting their health and in some cases their lives. So again, it's just like, even the cover up is a cover up of a cover up in some weird way or something.
Yeah, I think it's like just, you're getting at something I think it's really important. It's just like it's a cover up all the way down. Where is the actual truth? And then these same people, they look at Trump, say his health. Oh my gosh, the guy eats McDonald's, that, he probably has Diet Coke through his veins, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it's so much projection. It's just like, do you guys actually believe in anything real? Or is it just lust for power? You want to stay in, you want to, have all your connections, your money, et cetera, positions. I mean, and is that, ultimately what it's actually all about? Because all this kind of points in one direction, and that's where it seems to go.
I mean, Seth, you had a really good point. This piece in the Times of London about just like, this is sort of the wages of gerontocracy. Like,
well, yeah, it's just a funny situation we've got where people establish kind of a beachhead and, in office, like incumbents, and our system favors incumbency at the same time that longevity is like skyrocketing. So you just wind up with these people, and like Warren Buffett stepped down. Okay. Like he was 94 and he stepped down. And I guess typically in most jobs, even if they can't fire you for being old, there's pressures, right? But there's no real pressure. Like once you're elected, you're elected. And if you're going to start looking for, getting another, the thing is, because being an elected official, say like a senator or a congressman, it's not actually that hard. Like on a day-to-day basis, you've got like aides and staff, and they'll do everything for you. So like someone like Dianne Feinstein can run for office when she doesn't. It's like she doesn't. Clearly she was totally out of it. Yeah, I just think it's kind. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and certainly I think we will see more of this because I found this chart like 40 years ago, 45 years ago. Only 5% of Congress was over 70, and now it's close to 25%.
Jeez. This is like that show Succession, which I really liked on HBO, about this kind of Warren Buffett type figure and who's going to inherit his media empire. Like the one part of that show that was always kind of like the elephant in the room, and the way that it was not true to life, is that the patriarch up until the very end was sort of like sharper than any of his kids. Like he was just this absolute shark and gutted them and played them off against each other. And the reality is much closer to what you're alluding to, Seth, which is like it's actually the kind of younger people who are like jockeying for court power in this headless state, like with this kind of vacuum at the top. Um, well, okay, maybe that's all to be said about that for now. Speaking of conspiracy theories and conspiracy facts, this podcast. So there's a kind of line about ancient civilizations that they all have a murder at the beginning of them that is sort of the original like generative force behind the regime. So this is like Romulus and Remus killing each other, or Romulus killing Remus rather, to found Rome. This podcast does not have an original murder at the heart of it, but it does have an original conspiracy theory, which is that Epstein didn't kill himself. That was the first topic that we ever discussed on our first ever episode. I think I'm the only person on this particular episode who was there in the misty days of the origin story. But we kind of had this whole thing about how Epstein is this emblem of so many other things that people are making him into. And so he has this like totemic, that particular like conspiracy theory has this totemic power. And maybe that's one way of thinking about this thing that has happened with Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. So Kash Patel, now the FBI director, Dan Bongino, his deputy director, were on this Fox Sunday morning show with Maria Bartiromo. And they basically, after having, for Bongino especially, having, been part of the conversation about what happened to Epstein, they basically both just said, look, he killed himself. We've seen all of the classified documents. We have access to the secret information that you guys really want us to declassify. And there's like no there, essentially. So this was sort of a bombshell in MAGA world a little bit. I mean, I would like for you guys to help me like work through this and understand it, because the people who are really committed to Epstein having been kind of offed by the Clintons or some cabal or their agents or something as a specific event, not just as like this is a way of thinking about these like larger questions, but rather like this actually, the FBI really is keeping this from us. Were like kind of furious about this. I mean, Alex Jones obviously like totally does not buy it, deeply incensed. Tucker Carlson sort of perplexed, doing his like Tucker Carlson, what is this sort of thing routine. And so now there is like what do you guys think is going on here? Is this that the Patel and Bongino have sort of gotten into a position of actual access and power, and now they are like getting real about what's actually going on, which is that most of this stuff has been reported and is known. And yes, it was very shady. Yes, it was grotesque. But the actual like idea at the heart of it is not factually true. Like he did not actually kill himself, or is this Dan Bongino and Kash Patel getting captured by the deep state and peddling the cover-up line just along with everybody else?
Well, that's kind of the problem. Like, how can you argue your way out of a conspiracy theory? Because
right.
like it's unfalsifiable. Like it doesn't matter what evidence comes out or what anyone says.
Right.
If you disagree with it, well, then you're just like part of the problem.
It's epistemic closure. It's no true Scotsman. It's all.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the same thing a few months ago with the JFK files. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're all released now, and there's really not very much evidence. There's nothing. There's no smoking gun here.
Kash Patel said the same thing about that, by the way. It didn't make the same kind of splash, but he basically said,
So everybody wants it to be more. I mean, here's the thing about Jeffrey Epstein. People act like it's incomprehensible that he killed himself. Well, I guess you could say that about Anthony Bourdain or a whole host of people who kill themselves. Like, why would they do it? I don't think there's that much question as to why Jeffrey Epstein would kill himself. I mean, he's like the most reviled person in the world. He's in the worst prison, the worst jail, lockup, facing like a life in prison. So yeah, I can imagine why he would kill himself. And the other thing about it, I think like the right really wants to believe, and there's a certain truth to it that the other side is diabolical, that they're literally demonic, and that means that if you're demonic to that level, then you really are raping babies and eating them in front of all of your friends to show how,
like, metaphorically doing it, like
not metaphorically, you're actually doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so like he has this island, and he would bring people there, and it's clear that he had sex with like teenage girls, and so therefore he's a pedophile. Therefore, he was bringing the world elite to this island. Therefore, they were all raping them in the most savage kind of ritualistic context. There's just too many contingencies in all of this. I mean, it's clear that he was like, trafficking these girls and having sex with them and setting them up with his friends. But here's another question. Ghislaine Maxwell was the procuress, right? She was like his girlfriend, his major domo. She was running everything. She's in prison right now. Like, go talk to her. Go ask her what happened. Why hasn't she been killed? She knows everything. She probably knows things more than Jeffrey Epstein did, because she was like supposed to. Because she's the link to Mossad, right? Because her father probably was killed. Like he probably didn't drown himself off his yacht or whatever. But she's the link. So this is what everybody says. Like all of the fever line people. So I'm just saying, like, maybe things aren't quite as like people want to get wrapped up in their fantasies. Here's the thing, like I'm very interested in like the most obscure, craziest kind of JFK stuff you can come up with. At the same time, I basically think that Lee Harvey Oswald did it as a lone.
Exactly.
I find the other stuff fascinating from a literary point of view.
That's right. Well, so this is where I could tell that we were going to once again end up demon casting on this podcast, because like, this is exactly what we always come back to when we talk about these subjects, is that like every conspiracy theory is factually false and artistically true in some way, right? Like, so sometimes I will go, like every now and then I will get caught in a thread of replies to one of the true deep cut, like Pizzagate or Epstein conspiracy theories. And it's always like, by the time you get 2 or 3 tweets down, it's like you see the red hand that Tom Hanks imprints on the volleyball in Castaway. Like that face is also in the dress that this lady wore to the Met Gala. And like there is this kind of isomorphism, this like visual symbolism that reproduces itself in all of these places where fill in the blank, like children are being sort of demonically, ritualistically sacrificed. And the place where this all sort of breaks down is weirdly in a kind of obtuse literal mindedness. Like it's a literacy problem that
Yeah.
that like in some ways these are people who don't know how to like read like metaphor and symbolism and narrative and need it to be actually real, as you were saying, Seth. And like in fact a lot of this, I mean, another one of these is sometimes people will say like, you know, abortion is child sacrifice, just like they did to Baal in the ancient world, and at Carthage they would sacrifice kids to Baal Hamon and all this stuff. And you go like, well, it's not exactly like that, right? Like it's there are many ways in which it's in fact quite different. Like the theory of mind that you have to apply in the case of actual demon worshippers from the ancient world who thought they were worshiping their local cult deity is really quite different from the theory of mind you have to apply to some poor desperate mother who like has been schooled in this kind of atmospheric culture
Yeah.
of whatever, expendable children and all that. I mean, both grotesque and if you, like me, have a metaphysics of demonology, you can very well say, like, totally, this is the operation of the same demons across time, right? Like hoodwinking the human race. And you can say all of that without having to say that actually, like that same somewhere in the basement of some pizza parlor, there is like an altar where Bahamut is being like appeased with the blood of infants, right? Like that is not actually how that kind of like logic works. And maybe all of this can be like sort of straightened out with a proper application of like Augustinian modes of reading. Like some things are anagogical, some things are analogical, and other things are literal. And like
Yeah.
keeping those things apart is sort of important.
Well, here's the thing, like, and this is nobody wants to deal with the banality of evil.
Right.
Like a lot of the people who are into this stuff say they're Christians. Well, I mean, doesn't Corinthians say, well, Satan is the god of this world, right?
Mhm.
So if that's the
Yeah.
case, then it's all evil already. You don't need need to like, you know, concoct these like Grand Guignol scenarios. What you have in front of you is already the evil of the world.
Yeah, what's that movie you were referencing about the sort of like cabal in the basement of the apartment building?
Oh, like in Rosemary's Baby.
That's right. That's Rosemary's Baby, and it's like your point is basically that is just a way of kind of artistically heightening and therefore representing the actual state of the world. And like, I mean, this is the piece. I have this piece in the American Mind coming out at AmericanMind.org tomorrow that basically says this, that it's like, this is what Christians call the world, capital W. And part of the problem is that American Christianity is sometimes so used to prosperity and to relative freedom from persecution. I know that there are like counterexamples to this, but in general, right, this is a country that does not like round up Christians and execute them en masse. And so Christians are not always acquainted with just the like how seriously Jesus means that. Like he really is saying, you know, this is just a broken system from the word go. And so if you discover that the people in charge of the most powerful nation in the world are weaponizing the decline of an old man with cancer to like cover up their own petty venality, you know, that shouldn't be news to you. That should just be sort of that should be what you expect, and then you move from there, you know.
And that's what I was thinking, actually, just the link to the past thing, what we were just talking about. It's like, okay, so you seemingly have all these, you know, the conspiracy theory that, you know, Biden's unhealthy, that he's mentally fragile. It's like, oh yeah, actually, by the way, all that's true. So of course, in this instance, people are going to think, again, it's all true. But I mean, you can think that there are a lot of weird things that happen. I mean, just look at Jeffrey Epstein's life. I mean, the guy, as far as I understand, went from like, you know, private school teacher to like managing funds of billionaires in like a couple of years, $65 million, brownstone in New York City. I mean, like it doesn't make any sense on the surface, but I also know I don't have all the answers. I don't know the relationship between like him and Les Wexner, founder of the Limited, huge, lives in Columbus, Ohio, has many mansions. If you go on the campus of the Ohio State University, I mean, you'll see, Wexner Building for the Arts and this and that. So there's so many like little bits and pieces that we know, and you're trying to piece it together. And I think it's just easier to think there is some mastermind cabal, world over, international thing. It's all controlled by the elites in every aspect. And that's that. It's like, well, it's a lot harder to believe that there's sin, there's stupidity, there's actually some smart people there, but they're, some of them are working in concert, some are not. There's luck. Things happen. I mean, what if they could, what if all the stories about Jeffrey Epstein are true and then he actually did just kill himself? Like that. I never see that.
He would still have plenty of reason to do it. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, I can believe that he was blackmailing people
Sure.
on behalf of some intelligence community, and intelligence agency, either America, Israel, who knows what, Britain. He could have been,
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that like we've opened the gates of hell.
Right.
That's right. Like the way they do it in like the TV show Supernatural, where like the gates of hell are somewhere.
Okay, right.
Right.
I mean, the gates of hell are already open.
That's right. They're here. Like hell is empty and all the devils are here. That's the whole point. I mean, the other thing about this literal mindedness is that, and I think this ties into a lot of what's going on the right. Like Mike, you said, one thing you can just say is there are actually things that there are things that we don't know. And then Seth, you were like, yeah, but the right feels in many cases correctly so deprived of crucial information that there's this real hunger for the grand revelation to really put the nail in the coffin once and for all, and the smoking gun in either it's Epstein or it's JFK or it's whatever version of it. And if you try to do that and locate it in an actual particular like person or culprit, because Satan is the prince of the world, it does always circle the drain and spiral back down to end up being the Jews, right? Like this is also why we're having this like anti-Semitism thing going on the right, I think, as well, is because that has been the role that Jews have played like throughout history. It's like the Girardian scapegoat of this exact kind of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right under the surface.
Okay. Well, I guess we haven't solved whether Epstein did or didn't kill himself, although Kash, Patel, and Bongino say he did, and that seems perfect. As Seth is saying, that seems perfectly plausible to me. We should talk with some trepidation on my part about the economy, because every time we talk about this, I'm like, I hope that other people know more about it than I do. I like big bills, and I cannot lie. You other brothers can't deny. Trump has a big, beautiful bill. It's actually called that, and he wants all of it passed. That's, I think, part of why he's calling it that. This is a package that extends the 2017 tax cuts. It pairs back Medicaid and SNAP benefits. It funds the border wall. It does a ton of different stuff. And Trump's got a narrow Republican majority in Congress. So the holdouts are incredibly significant. I mean, you have people like Chip Roy and so forth who are worried that this just piles on basically more debt and spending, and that this is a bill that is ultimately going to come due. We've already been through this very turbulent period of tariffs, and like, where are the tariffs going? We're still not totally sure what deals are going to be arranged there. And so Trump is trying to kind of jam this through the House, I think, over the objections of a few House Republicans. Last I read about it, Mike Johnson said that there might even be a vote today. So this may already be outdated by the time you hear it. But after that, of course, it will have to face the Senate. So there will be probably a protracted fight about it there. This comes in an environment where, Moody's just downgraded the U.S. credit rating, which the Trump team contests. Trump is telling Walmart it needs to like eat the costs of the tariffs and not pass them on to the consumer. This is on Truth Social that he's posting about this. So I don't know. Did I get all that right? What do you guys make of it?
Yeah, I think it's it's a complicated thing. I mean, I'll just get into a little bit more even, just adding on what you said about the bill itself. This is just from some Wall Street Journal reports. They say it would increase the budget deficit by nearly 3 trillion over a decade. So, problematic. If it gets out of the House and goes to the Senate, I can't see Rand Paul being a huge fan of that. It does extend the 2017 tax cuts, which I think Biden also extended, child tax credits, keeps the expanded child tax credit, also created by the 2017 law. I think that's like $2,000 per kid. It obviously has the elimination, the taxes on tips, overtime pay, Social Security benefits. That is just, though, that's not for all time. That's just actually 2025 through 2028, which actually I did not know that. So that's interesting that it's actually just 3 years and that's it. The Medicaid cuts are interesting. There's actually a big kind of fight on the right about that. You have Steve Bannon who says absolutely do not touch that at all. And Trump, the reports when he spoke to the Republican caucus, he said absolutely don't touch that either. So we'll see what happens there. The SNAP benefits are, I haven't really seen anybody, talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I think Trump wants to have this on his desk by, I think, July 4th. He wants to sign it. I mean, in the House, there's just such a small margin. I think only really, 3 people can defect and this bill can actually pass. So, it's probably not going to be good enough. I'm sure the fiscal hardliners are just going to grit their teeth. More of the moderates are probably not going to like some of the cuts. But, I think at the end of the day, I mean, they're already thinking about 2026. So I think this is going to pass probably in some way, shape, or form. Most people are probably not going to be happy about it, but I think Trump's going to ultimately get a victory out of this.
What I find weird, it's like, okay, 7 years ago, whenever it was, they eliminated the SALT deduction, like state and local taxes. You couldn't take those off. And at the time, and I live in New York, and so I took a hit, and everybody I know took a hit because you could no longer deduct your state and local taxes. But at the time, I was like, okay, well, in a way, I see the value of it because it was seen, I guess, at the time as an attack on the blue state model of like high taxation and like expensive social services and a lot of government waste.
You don't have this problem if you live in Tennessee, right? Like this is
right.
The idea. Yeah.
Right. And so in a sense, like the red states were subsidizing the blue states because we could like take those off our federal taxes. But now I guess they're quadrupling the SALT deduction. It's going up to $40,000 from $10,000. So it just seems like well, what was the point? Mm-hmm. What was the point of any of that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, look, Trump's not a fiscal conservative, and anybody who thought he was going to be one is out to lunch. He's not going to cut stuff to try to. His idea is that he's just going to make the business climate so amazing between tariffs and energy and cutting regulations and stuff that America's economy will just explode, and that will get rid of the debt. He's not going to cut Medicaid or anything, and I'm in favor of cutting taxes, but you can't pretend like it's. I mean, it kind of it will have a cost. I mean, you can't if you're not going to raise taxes and you're not going to cut other stuff. Well, then you're going to wind up with more debt.
I mean, he said this again and again. You can't accuse him of hiding the ball, as you indicate, that he is not going to be the president who addresses this like massive issue. It's going to get kicked down the road again. And if you are a particular kind of conservative, then this makes you crazy. And it's not like you don't have a point, right? Like it is a crisis. We keep talking about it anytime this topic comes up on the show, that like, yes, eventually this is gonna, like, reality is gonna hit here, and there's all sorts of disastrous stuff that could potentially come along with that, and we should kind of brace ourselves for it. But Trump is the guy to fix many things. His supporters claim his supporters have never claimed, even on his behalf, that he was the guy to fix this. It is the place where he has been most vulnerable in this second term, I think. Like, this is clearing aside the really ridiculous attacks that have been made on him. The tariffs and the debt are where, like, he might really face trouble in the midterms. I'm waiting to read. Chris Caldwell has a piece on the tariffs in the new CRB, which we are putting to bed right now, so it will be in your mailbox soon enough. But I haven't read Chris on this yet, but I think I get the impression that there's a similar argument in that piece that unless he can really resoundingly explain what his sort of plan is here, then he's going to be vulnerable to actual criticisms if people start to feel the hurt of this. On the other hand, it hasn't happened yet, so we'll see.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. I'm kind of, the skeleton kind of tapping my fingers. I mean, waiting for that. It still hasn't happened yet. It seems like all these great deals can get done, great, but that is just not going to fundamentally affect. I mean, the debt. We just ran. I've probably talked about this before, but a great piece by Jeffrey Anderson at TAM, probably was 3-4 weeks ago, maybe even a month or two ago. And it just said, is Doge enough? Even those cuts, even if Elon Musk could have actually cut $1 trillion out of the budget, which didn't end up happening, it looks like, is that even enough? No, it doesn't even come close. You have to tackle entitlements. You have to tackle Medicaid. I mean, Social Security, yeah, is an issue, but that by far is not even the biggest issue. If you really want to course correct, if you really want to stave off what looks to be, an absolute looming financial disaster that's going to be happening at some point. I mean, the math just lines up that way. You have to tackle these programs. At the same time, I understand why Trump doesn't want to do that. He saw, the Republican rhetoric, kind of this pure numbers stuff and not really caring about Americans actually as citizens, just kind of seeing them as, just quantitative things on some bar chart or whatever. So I get that. But the math is still the math. If he could somehow, and he's not going to do this. I mean, I think it's just going to be JD Vance. Is he going to be able to do this? Hopefully,
does he want to? I mean,
does he want to? And I don't. I actually don't see him really wanting to either. So
right.
I just don't see how this doesn't end very, very poorly.
There is this thing, like you said, Mike, of waiting for the shoe to drop, and it feels like we're always waiting. And you see this also in the tariff conversation, as you listen to people who are really upset about the tariffs, and they're always saying, when people start to see higher prices in grocery stores, this is going to be really bad for Trump.
Yeah.
And in that sort of limited time scale, I think there is kind of a missing piece, which is the negotiation thing that Trump is always doing, where it's not clear that the situation he starts out with is going to be what he ends up with in time for your eggs or your meat or whatever to skyrocket in price. I certainly am not feel when Biden's inflation hit grocery stores, I felt it hard. I think everybody did.
Oh yeah,
see it very palpably, and that's why it was so damaging for him politically. Right, it was one of the things, along with immigration, that people just really connected to at a visceral level, and that has not happened with the tariffs.
And I think with tariffs, yeah, I would actually separate just the debt problem from tariffs. I think with some of the deals that Trump is going to strike, I think that he already has, say, with India, Vietnam, I saw, and some other countries. I mean, I think that's actually going to work out ultimately to his benefit. In the short term, he needed to start delivering some tangible benefits up soon. We'll see if that happens, but I just have a feeling it is going to work out in his favor. The problem is with the debt. I mean, not only does he not want to do it, he is, basically he's run on opposing anything like that. And I just don't see anybody interested on the horizon who even has a chance, at the presidency, who's even discussing it in any kind of serious manner.
He cares about it. He cares about money, right, in the economy in a way that he doesn't about, say, abortion, right? I mean, he's been, right? He's been a good president for conservatives on abortion.
Definitely.
Yeah. But not out of, I think, a really committed inward principle that he's devoted to. The tariff stuff, the thesis that Seth laid out, that we're just going to build, baby, build, and everything's going to be so great that we'll we'll coast over. That stuff he really, I think, is close to the heart of things he believes.
Yeah.
We've got just a little time. Let's touch on this issue of the white South Africans, because this is an area, a totally different area for Trump. So, Seth, I'm going to rely on you to sort of fill in the details here too, because I have not been following the story this closely. It seems like there are 59 white South Africans who showed up in the U.S. claiming refugee status, right, as victims of racial discrimination. And so, of course, the left immediately ridiculed this extravagantly because South Africa has this, history of apartheid that is now, receding into the past. But it's like, this is backwards discrimination. This can't happen, right? There's no such thing as reverse racism. Meanwhile, Trump and the administration and his supporters are totally like would completely agree with that characterization of the condition of white South Africans, and so they've been kind of like welcomed. And I was just watching somebody like feeding this into ChatGPT, this whole issue to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT, which has a famous kind of leftward bent, as many AI chatbots do, explaining that this is not a real argument because basically white people are not eligible for racial discrimination refugee status. But Seth, help me to like unravel this. What exactly is Trump up to here?
Well, I mean, over the last 20 years, there have been a lot of pretty savage murders of white, like Boers, like Dutch German types. And they are a scapegoat of elements of South African politics. So, that they're always talking about land seizures, and a lot of the rulers down there, like if they're asked, do you plan to seize land? They're like, well, not today, but we'll keep that in our pocket. And so, and there's these like ANC songs about kill the Boer. So the question,
like from the river to the sea, it's really
it's a little bit like
it's a liberation cry, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is, there have been a lot of very brutal murders. Is it like actually a genocide? Well, I mean, I guess nowadays, like you can call anything a genocide and you'll get people who will agree with you. Here's the thing. U.S. refugee law and like seeking asylum is very specific about who qualifies. And it's like, oh, you're facing persecution for race, gender, being part of a particular like ethnic group or religion, all the immutable characteristic things, right? I don't even think I'm not exactly sure how it works, but generally speaking, it's pretty tightly defined. Although in practice, of course, like, we know that people will just come up to the border and we're told, oh, just say you have a legitimate fear of persecution, and then they'll let you in. And but then there's all these stories of like because in a lot of countries, like places like Somalia or Sudan, like politics and tribal affiliation run kind of closely together. Then you wind up with these situations where like people come in pleading asylum, and then 2 years later they're vacationing in the country they had to flee. Basically, this is just a long way of getting to the point that like I think that there's elements of the MAGA movement who are like, okay, well, if you're going to start claiming these cases of some gang member in Venezuela who's being chased by the other gang, who's like he killed a gang member, and now that if they're going to get asylum, well, why not like white South Africans? Tucker did a whole thing on white South Africans, and it's it's been around for like a long time. And I think they're saying, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Let's give as long as we're giving asylum to people, how about them? So
yeah, and there's no like mention of the word historic in that language that you alluded to, right? So it's not that this is like, because the left's sort of, the progressive left's approach to this is always that it's not just your particular circumstance. It's like the historical narrative that situates you relative to how your ancestors were treated.
Mhm.
From that perspective, of course, like South Africa only has one racial story, right? It only has the persecution of black people by white people. If you are like still clinging by the skin of your teeth to some kind of individualism, then why isn't a white South African sort of eligible for exactly the same sorts of protections, or or more eligible than some of these claimants? And it's like on the one hand, it feels like the sort of long predicted return of white racial politics, which people have been saying for a long time, like you're not going to like it. Like if you really start like prodding this hornet's nest, it's going to be bad. On the other hand, it's like, well, what is like we don't really have, since the civil rights era, we don't really have a cogent like articulation of what our opinion is about this. Like, is it you personally who are either a victim or not of racial persecution, or is it only these like historical categories that get to count and some races are just sort of excluded?
I think with this too, I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's like, so the left is accepting, everybody but white people. I mean, I saw the Episcopal Church, I think they cut off their missions because of this, 59 white people. So it just fuels perception that, I mean, the left is really, like anti-American, anti-white. I mean, Jeremy Carl's been talking about this for a long time, obviously with his book. So yeah, and it just brings us to a point in our politics where, do you really want to divide along racial lines? Do you really want to have some of these battles? I mean, you read, in the early republic, Jefferson and some of the other founders talking about, the threat of race war. And it's like, okay, do you really want to start fomenting the culture where like that could be possible in 50 years? Like, why are you doing this?
It's such bait. It's
right. It's just such, I mean, poor thinking, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's like, are these people this stupid, or do they really want something like this? I mean, it's kind of almost impossible to even comprehend that.
I mean, right. Yeah.
Political opinion does count, but but not that many people in the world are actually being persecuted like due to their political opinions. I mean, I guess you'd have to like make a pretty good case for it.
Right. Like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, among the other like legitimate claims she would have to this sort of status if she were coming over now. Like this would be one of them.
Sure.
Somebody who has actually been like hunted down for the things that she's like said. But right. No, it is, as you say, Mike, extremely nearsighted unless your tactic is to goad your enemies into doing something stupid, which seems to be like a pretty decent theory of the case. Okay, well, thanks, Seth, for filling us in on that. That's really interesting. Let us, before we go, just lighten the mood a little bit with some recommendations of stuff. Do you guys have anything on TAM or off to recommend to people?
Yeah, I would say off TAM. I don't know. I haven't done this actually recently. I've been listening to a ton of classical music, but I just started kind of switching over almost like to rock and 70s rock and 80s rock, but just kind of listening through albums again. Like, not editing. I cannot edit with words at all, but just, having whole albums just kind of playing through. I listen on YouTube, Spotify, and, that's probably a lot more popular, but I'm the YouTube guy. I'm actually later this summer. I'm going to see Toto, Christopher Cross, and somebody else. So that kind of tells you where I am musically.
I love Toto. I like unironically.
I'm a huge Toto fan. Like Steve Lukather on guitar. I mean, next to Eddie Van Halen, like definitely one of my favorite guitarists of all time. He's fantastic.
Nice. I would throw. I know that this is a little cringe, but I would throw John Mayer in there with one of the great living. Among the great living guitars, slightly different genre. And
yeah, I mean, I would have cringed too, like 6 months ago. But honestly, you start listening to the guy, like move past, kind of the, miasma kind of around him, and you really listen to him, and like especially his live stuff. He is really talented.
Listen to the live recording of "Slow Dancing in a Burning Room," and he really he's got chops. Cool. Seth, do you have anything?
Well, I did find this funny, this strange video that's also kind of a blast from the past. Elliott Smith, sort of an emo singer, but very, very, very talented, extremely talented. But this funny video of him on some weird like MTV morning show before he got famous, just as a guest. And it was like this cyber show. It's like the most bizarre scenario. And so there's like 20 people sitting around in like a loft, and he's playing, and then they're kind of ribbing him. They're like ribbing him for being kind of a like a depressive, angry guy. And then he plays this song, which I think is very good, and everybody just kind of like it has the weirdest emotional punch on everybody. It's like it's a very curious video. It's like this strange mix of genres, but it's kind of fun to watch. And people who watch it, like the comments are just like, this is the most bizarre bit of television I've ever seen or heard of.
I have this running thing now this year where I read novels on the weekends to like clear my head from all the academic jargon and stuff that typically goes in my ears and my eyes. And Seth, you may like this one. Like, I have never read of Human Bondage, the big like kind of Bildungsroman novel by Mom, W. Somerset Maugham. And last year I read The Razor's Edge, which I just think is almost like a near perfect novel. It's such a exquisite little slender book. And this is very different. It's clearly on the model of like David Copperfield, sort of this very thinly veiled autobiographical story of a young boy with a club foot growing up in England. I'm only like 100, 150 or so pages into it. And I've tried to get into it before and not really quite like landed for some reason. Sometimes you just meet a book and you're like in the right mood for it. This is a great novel. Like this is a novel that I wish I could be reading not on the weekends. It's so engrossing. It's like immediately kind of urgent and alive. And it is, as Mom says in the introduction to it, it's like less sort of mannered and crafted than his other works. So it's not dense prose. It's just very plain diction, straightforward, but full of instantly memorable, almost Dickensian characters. And I can't wait to see what comes of it.
That's good to hear. I read The Razor's Edge, but I never read Of Human Bondage, so I'll take that. Right.
Okay, yeah, totally. It's one of the greats. All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to know more about our work, you can visit our website, some of which we've already mentioned, The American Mind at americanmind.org. Claremont Review Books at ClaremontReviewOfBooks.com. New issue coming out imminently, and so you should subscribe now so you get it, the paper copy in your mailbox. One of the great enduring pleasures of print literary culture, produced right here at the Claremont Institute. And you can find out about our DC-based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. Finally, if you want to support any and all of that, you can donate to support our work at claremont.org/donate, which we greatly appreciate in any amount, large or small. Thanks to our production and engineering crew, Ryan G. and Jake G., the brothers Gannon. And thanks to you all for listening. We will talk to you next week.